Hello everyone! So recently, a lot more people have been jumping into Source 2. Now that you can get the tools with Half-Life Alyx, Steam VR, Dota 2, Sandbox, and most recently Aperture Desk Job, Source 2 is becoming increasingly more accessible. And over on the Source Filmmaker Discord server, there are more and more questions and discussions and resources popping up about Source 2 every day. So I thought I'd put together a series of tips and tricks videos for stuff that I've picked up so far. Of course, the tools are fairly new and I'm still learning new things every day myself, but hopefully some of this will be useful. Also, a lot of the techniques will be familiar for anyone who's used the original Source Filmmaker or just Source 1 in general. So one of the most common questions and problems I see people running into when they start using Source 2 are their textures and models just becoming a blurry mess. This is usually because Source 2, at least the version Half-Life Alyx uses, gets confused and basically believes you have no memory left to use. You can usually fix this by opening the console with the tilde key and typing R texture pool size and then some high value like 10,000 or more. This forces SFM to load as many textures as it can. I even had this problem myself with a 2080 Super with 8 gigs of VRAM. But now my textures are crispy. So crisp. So like the original SFM, you can right-click any model and add scale controls to it. But unlike the original SFM, you can't right-click on any individual bone and add scaling to it. Oh, that would be too easy. To do this in Source 2, you need to open the model in the element viewer, expand the bone list, and right-click on the bone you want to scale. Then add a new float attribute and type scale. You'll notice that the bone will disappear completely because it defaults to a scale of 0, so if we put 1, it goes back to normal scale, or put a 2 and it's twice as big. Of course, you can apply this to any bone in the list, so you can have massive arms, fingers, other body parts. Now if you right-click the bone, you can create an animation set for it, and this will create a slider so you can animate and scale it over time. For some reason though, the slider is only visible if you have scene hierarchy disabled, so keep that in mind. A really useful new feature is not only can you instantly apply an IK rig to any model that has a 3-bone chain, so arms, legs, spines, but if you select the first and last bones in a chain, you can then apply a spline rig that makes it really easy to move the entire bone structure smoothly. This is also great for animating tails or long necks, other body parts. Another handy new feature is that you can very easily change the map in every shot on your timeline. So you can have a single animation project that spans a huge range of maps or scenes. If you right-click on any clip on the timeline, you can set the shot map override and then just scroll through your list of maps and choose whatever you want. Once a shot has a map override, you can just right-click in the viewport and set the shot map override there instead. A common complaint when people see Source 2 renders is that they look really flat and low contrast, especially compared to Source 1 renders. This is because by default, Source 2 uses a flat log-style tone map that helps to preserve colors and contrast, a lot like professional cameras. This is useful when you're doing color grading or other post-production, but the renders straight out of SFM will often look quite flat and bland. So you can obviously correct this in your editor of choice, but you can also fix it in-engine by using the handy post-process editor. Inside the editor, you can simply go to File, New, and create a new preset, and by default you'll have a tone map applied automatically. So if we look at the tone curve, we can see that the lower end shadows are very flat, leading to the grey look. So you can push up the shoulder strength to give a little boost to the highlights, and the toe strength will boost the contrast between the shadows and the highlights. And you can tweak it a little bit more to fine-tune it, but already you should see that there's a lot more dynamic range and contrast. You can also add bloom by going to Add Layer, Bloom. And the bloom here is much higher quality and offers a lot more control compared to the Source 1 bloom. You can adjust all kinds of things like different strengths for different resolutions, and so you can really make it suit your scene or make it look just right for the materials that you have. So once you set up your bloom and color grading, you can also save this to a file and then open that at any time. And if you have it open in the post-process editor, it will apply to any scene that you have open. Another issue a lot of people run into is they try to add a particle, say an explosion or something from Half-Life Alyx, and it's just not in the scene. You can't find it anywhere. This is because by default, when you spawn a lot of the particles from Half-Life, they only spawn at the origin of the map. So if we go to the origin, which is this grid, you'll see that the explosion spawns all the way over here. And if we select the particle and try to move it, it just doesn't move. It's just completely stuck to the origin point. So to fix this, you need to decompile the Half-Life Alyx particles so that we have all the source materials and controls and everything in the particle editor. So for those of you who don't want to decompile all of the Half-Life Alyx particles, I'm going to include a download to the particles.zip in the description of this video, so you can put this particles folder in your Half-Life Alyx add-on folder. So once that's in place, you can then right-click any particle and open it in the particle editor. So having the source files means that we have access to all of these controls. And if we go to add function, search for position control, we want to add position from control points. And then you can save this. But you'll see now that if we go to our particle, it actually moves wherever we put the control point. As if by magic. If you also want to be able to rotate the particle, we need to add another function and add an initialize control point orientation by rotations. So now we can select the control point and rotate it. Now obviously this will look a bit weird if you have 2D sprite particles, but still, it can be useful. So anyway, that's just a few of the essential things I think everyone should know when using Source 2 and the Filmmaker. Obviously there's a lot more to cover, but I'll be making more videos diving into the specifics later on. Things like porting custom models from the internet, porting old Source 1 models, scene building tips, Hammer 2, ambient occlusion proxy meshes, texture editing. There's a lot of cool new stuff to cover, so stay tuned for that. Hopefully you found some of this useful, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.